Welcome back to Close Up on our extended conversation with Governor Kelly Ayotte. Governor, thank you again for joining us. So one of the biggest applause lines you had in your State of the State speech, it was kind of a surprise to me. It was for the next generation nuclear power. You had a lot of fellow Republicans on their feet really cheering for that one. This is a long way off, but you said you want to build the pathways toward it. Do you have any vision yet of how many of these facilities could be built in New Hampshire and where they might go?
I would just say this, Adam. This would be terrific for New Hampshire. They're small modular reactors, so they are, not the size of what we have in Seabrook. You could put them in communities really where it would make sense. Of course, we'd work with the local community. There's federal requirements, but we want to prepare for this type of technology to be in New Hampshire because our electric rates are too high. So if we could generate our own energy, it would be phenomenal. Of course, it's protective of the environment, it's carbon neutral, so there's a lot of positives to it. And so I'd like to see New Hampshire be on the cutting edge of this type of technology so we can bring rates down, protects the environment, and we can generate our own power.
The Executive Council just approved a six-figure contract to study separating New Hampshire from the regional electric grid. What's your perspective on this? Do you think it's a good idea to sort of declare independence from ISO New England?
Well, I know there's going to be a study on that. I find it hard to believe that we would be able to do that. I certainly have as many concerns about ISO New England as some of the decisions that our neighbors have made that drive up rates. But when I look at this and I look at ISO New England, I think it would be hard for us to withdraw, but certainly we'll look at the study.
Auto inspections repeal, not necessarily in a good place right now. Do you share the concerns that were aired by Executive Councilor Joseph Kenney that the legislature screwed this up and needs to act quickly to get in line with the Clean Air Act?
Well, listen, I wish that the legislature had the right to make this decision. I wish that they had given us a greater ramp to get this approval. But as the Commissioner of Department of Environmental Services said the other day, we are in compliance. Our air is clean, and so this is somewhat of a paperwork issue that needs to be resolved. I look at this, the legislature has the right to weigh in on this. What's most important is that I don't want drivers to feel like, what am I supposed to be doing right now? And the Department of Safety has given guidance on this, so I would urge your viewers to take a look at that on their website and make sure that they understand. They are not going to be coming down on people for this. However, you want to make sure that you understand what is happening.
And do you think we're going to see this? The AG essentially said it's like an amnesty. Nobody's going to be dinged for this in the first 3 months of the year. Do you think that'll just continue until potentially the EPA can weigh in?
Well, I think that we want to be fair to the people of New Hampshire. The law was changed. That was widely publicized, and some people haven't gotten their car inspected as a result. And we don't want people to get fines or to get penalties for something that they thought was going to happen and what the law was going to be. So I think we're going to be very reasonable about this and not unfairly enforce this law when in fact it was passed by the legislature, and then we're in this period where there's some lack of clarity because of the court decision.
Yeah, someone with a January birthday, I can appreciate the extra time for now.
I mean, and I can understand that. What we don't want is people to feel like, wow, I didn't get inspected, so I'm in trouble. So I think it's good that Department of Safety, gave them some guidance saying that they're going to have an amnesty period. You
also said in your State of the State that you want the Commissioner of Education to really look into low reading scores, where they're happening across the state and why. Some would argue that the answer to this is clear, that places where parents can read to their kids and have more economic means tend to do better. What do you think it is that can be found out that isn't already known?
I think that is not a sufficient answer. First of all, I think that we should have every child in the state reading at the level that they should so that they can succeed in the future. And so I look at this, and there are best practices that we can apply in New Hampshire. In fact, not just in New Hampshire, but other states, like, believe it or not, Mississippi. They call it the Mississippi Miracle. Looking at what has been done so that we can bring everyone up to level when it comes to reading, because we know that is so important to future success.
Big debate in the Senate now, moving on to the House, and this bill could end up on your desk sooner rather than later. This is the Open Enrollment in Public Schools bill. What's your position on this concept? You've got a lot of superintendents saying, don't drop this in our lap right now.
Well, certainly, as I have looked at that bill and, we're studying the language of it, But I've already expressed some concerns I have about how it's drafted at this point to the leaders of the House and the Senate. I think there's much more work that needs to be done on this bill because of some of the local feedback that we've heard in our office. And again, education is so important to this state. We're spending a historical amount on education per pupil in the state, but we want to make sure that at the local level that we're not disrupting their ability to serve each child and serve them well every single day. So I'm going to take a look at the language of this bill, but I do think there needs to be more work done on it.
Another big bill that's under discussion right now, the House has passed it. It's going back to committee, though. Campus carry. This is the bill that would eliminate all gun restrictions at public colleges and universities. If this reaches your desk, will you sign it?
Well, the language of that bill we're still reviewing. I certainly am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. However, I think there are other states that have gone in this direction, and I think we need to look at them and look at what they've done and how they've actually applied this on campus and whether it makes sense. I can tell you I'm very focused on school safety. Our Department of Homeland Security has a school safety committee that has been revitalized since I've become governor. And how do we work with schools to make sure that they are hardened, that they're in a position where, if God forbid they had a situation, they would know how to respond to it. And so working with our Department of Homeland Security, local law enforcement, is so important. So there are issues that I think need to be studied about what just came out of the House.
You know, the Second Amendment argument is a compelling one. There's also the cultural aspect too. You know, the states that have legalized this, I think, you know, you've got Idaho, Montana, and gosh, I'm blanking, another Mountain West state, Utah. That's right. You know, people think of higher ed here in New England, and it may not necessarily be, oh, I'm going to parade around campus with a long gun. Do you see a cultural issue with this?
I also think that there's been a variety of approaches, and I'm not familiar with all of them, and I think that we really need to look at them and how they're doing it. And so that is important, and also what are the implications of it and the geography and whether it makes sense for New Hampshire.
Do you see yourself getting to a point where you can sign it, though?
I'm going to look at this bill, but I think these are issues that need to be looked at and studied before I could tell you that at this point.
Housing
As you know, it's early in the legislative process.
There's a lot of time left.
Yeah.
Housing Champions program. The House just voted to repeal this. This is the incentive program that started during COVID. Used to have a lot of money. Now it's not as much, obviously. Is this a good idea for someone who wants to do everything possible on housing to get rid of this?
No, I don't support that. I don't think we should repeal this program. Because, I mean, even the designation is important to communities. And it's a program that I would hope when we, as we look at the next budget, I would continue.
We're going to continue checking the box here on different things. Your nominee to the Supreme Court, Dan Will, he's already a Superior Court judge, quite an accomplished resume in the
Yes.
law. But he did, to the chagrin of some, defend COVID-era policies as Solicitor General. You know, what do you say to your fellow Republicans who believe that this somehow disqualifies him from the High Court?
What I would say is this. First of all, I do have some experience in this area. I was Attorney General. I've argued before the state Supreme Court. I've argued before the United States Supreme Court. I was a Sherpa for Justice Neil Gorsuch on the United States Supreme Court. And so I look at these positions. Is he qualified? Eminently qualified. Will he apply the Constitution as written? Yes, he will. Both the state and the federal. And does he have the experience and the knowledge to be an excellent Supreme Court justice? He does. So I would say to them that clearly he was doing his job. And having been an Attorney General, I understand this. His job at the time, if there was a legal basis to do so, was to defend the governor. He would do the same for the legislature or the executive council. That is the job of the Attorney General. He was asked by Attorney General McDonald to do that, did his job, and obviously did it well. He's a Superior Court justice now. He is the best qualified for this job. And I think I have a little experience in this area. And I would hope that we would put the best person on the bench.
Let's close out on highway safety. This is a top priority for you this year. Obviously, you said in your State of the State address, you want to close this loophole in DWI testing.
Yes.
When someone refuses a breathalyzer test, New Hampshire has a very lenient penalty, and in fact, a lot of people are just taking this route to take the administrative suspension rather than the DWI conviction. You know, the House has said they don't want to go along with this, and the alliance that is formed against the change is very similar to the one that stood against against any
Right.
changes to bail
Against
reform.
bail law.
And so you were able to kind of crack that nut last year. How are you going to convince House members that this is a good idea when they voted against it a few times now?
Well, I'm going to work really hard on this because it's a huge public safety issue. When we're almost tops in the country in terms of people refusing to take a breath alcohol test, and we have danger on our roads, and I want to ask those House members to really sit down and talk to the parents of those who have lost someone that they love, because I have. And it's unacceptable. People that shouldn't have been on our roads, but were on our roads. So we want to lead in public safety. We should not be last on this. Just like that bail law, this is just as important in public safety. So I'm going to work hard to build that coalition, because at the end of the day, I don't want to have that conversation with another mother or father.
All right, Governor Kelly Ayotte, thanks for joining us so much on Close Up. Real quick, Super Bowl prediction?
Oh, Pats all the way. Let's go, May. Let's go, Vrabel. Let's go, the whole team. They're awesome.
Thanks for being here, Governor. We appreciate your time.